Hello everyone. Growing up, I had almost no exposure to Superman whatsoever. I have a very fuzzy memory of seeing Man of Steel back when it was in theaters in 2014, and I was really into the various Batman cartoons they had running on Cartoon Network, so I picked up some knowledge by proxy due to how much the two crossed over. I knew the basics. Man, faster than a speeding bullet, Planet Go Boom, journalist, Lois Lane, Lex Luthor, but that's about it. I've never read the comics, never watched Batman v Superman or the Justice League, never watched the 90s movies, never watched the animated Superman shows, and never played the Injustice-verse games. It's not that I disliked Superman as a kid, but he always just struck me as the superhero with the least flair. Batman, he's a bat. Spider-Man, he's a spider. Superman, well, he's just a man but really strong. So with no pressing interest, I didn't go out of my way to dig up Superman material. And that's a shame, because it seems like there's a lot to the character worth exploring. The 90s movie was deemed culturally significant enough it got preserved in the Library of Congress. Now that my tastes have changed, I've learned to appreciate a hero whose whole thing is being big strong, and wanting to be good while being big strong. And Superman embodies that theme perfectly. That's probably why the Superman fanbase and the Dragon Ball fanbase orbit each other so closely. And as anyone knows, I'm a big fan of Dragon Ball. Given that Goku's entire backstory and Saiyans as a whole are inspired by Superman, I'm practically a Superman fan already. So with that in mind, I figured I'd go see the new Superman movie. So how was it for someone who only had secondhand knowledge of the guy who has over a century of lore behind his character? Well, let's dive in. So to begin with, I found it very odd seeing Superman get mollywopped constantly. All the ethos around the character really painted him as this super invincible guy who could just smack anyone. You know, kind of like a man who was super. But in this movie, he just gets thrashed a lot. It's not like this is unique to this interpretation of the character, though. I remember in Man of Steel, he got thrown around plenty, but that was because his foe was another Kryptonian, so they had equal stats. But in this movie, it was kind of odd seeing Superman struggle with certain threats that should have been below his pay grade. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I really got the interpretation that Superman's super strength was kind of relative to his emotions at the time, making him not unlike Yusuke Urameshi in the sense that he can only be super strong whenever he's super tapped into his powers. Not that I think this is inherently wrong. On the contrary, I think providing a significant enough nerve to a character can do wonders for raising the stakes of a series. And I like seeing this more reserved version of Superman. He has to go into every battle knowing it could well be his last. And that was a huge part of the character's struggle throughout the movie. I always thought throughout the comics, Superman was portrayed as this super invincible figure, with the escapism around his character being focused on how he can demolish any threat with no issues. You know, he's someone for young boys to look up to and think, wow, I wish I could be strong enough to help everyone like Superman. But this version of Superman seems like a deconstruction of that. Instead of being strong and stoic enough to handle every problem with no issue, he struggles with the want to do good conflicting with his ability to actually do good. And that leads me to the next part of this movie that I found interesting. You see, I always thought that Superman was kind of this blue Boy Scout dude. He doesn't do good because he feels like doing good is the right thing to do. He does good because doing good makes him feel good, and that's the only real way. I distinctly remember doom-scrolling one day and stumbling across this clip from the animated series. It was an episode where Clark Kent runs a news story that he shouldn't have, and his car gets blown up as a result, and everyone thinks that Clark Kent is dead. But, as we all know, he's kinda super-ish, so he survived the explosion no problem. Going back to Ma and Pa Kent, he gets comforted by them, who tell him that at the very least with Clark Kent out of the way, he can be Superman full-time. But Superman tells them that's the thing. He enjoyed being Clark Kent, and he enjoyed the good that it allowed him to do. I didn't pick up that type of vibe from this Superman. This Superman just seems like he is super burdened with the weight of having to save the day. A Superman who, himself, wants to be a Superman-like figure. That's the thing. He wants to be super. He wants to save the day. He wants to be the person that everyone around him projects themselves on. But he just can't. The more he holds on to it, the more it all slips through his fingers. And believe me, people project themselves on Superman a lot throughout this movie. There's a much darker take on Superman's biological parents in this film. Instead of them sending him to Earth to save his life, they sent him there to conquer it, straight out of some Goku energy. This wildly conflicted with my pre-established notion of the characters. which is that they genuinely wanted their son to do some good. This ties into the entire movie's theme about how our choices define us. And it really reminded me a lot of Spider-Man 2 in the sense that we can choose to do good even when we're at our lowest. And that's the part of Superman that I found the most compelling. It can be cool to look up to this super invincible dude, but deep down, we only do it because we want to be able to do good for those around us. Seeing someone fight to keep their ambition to do good alive as the world around them tries to drown it is the core emotion around this movie, and that definitely correlates with the picture of Superman that I had in my head. While I think this is a good message, and I love that this movie exists, I can see why some fans of comic book Superman wouldn't really approve of it. While I do think there's a place for this interpretation of Superman, it was clearly a deconstruction from the norm. And I think the comic depiction of Superman that's this invincible figure who never struggles, because doing good is just his nature, is also equally as valid and is just as needed in our pop culture. As far as other aspects about this movie that I liked, Superman straight up goes on some shonen protagonist energy, and he inspires everyone around him to do better. Well, except Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor, as always, is such a hater that he inspires me to become more of a hater. Just like how everyone in this movie projects an unstoppable hero onto Superman, Lex Luthor goes the complete opposite route and projects all of society's insecurities on Superman. At the end of the movie, he flat out goes on an entire rant about how he hates Superman, because Superman is just a symbol of how far humanity is below aliens. But that's the thing. Superman doesn't have to be a reminder that humans are nothing compared to Kryptonians. He's there to stand as a symbol, but even though we all can't be Kryptonians, that doesn't mean we can't keep the spirit of Superman alive in our hearts. And overall, I think that's what Superman is supposed to be at his core. A figure that inspires us to keep good alive. As far as other aspects of the film, this movie ropes in a lot of other characters from the DC-verse, and it kinda feels like it's the second movie in an already existing series. In some ways, that makes it not very newcomer-friendly, but the characters are dynamic enough that you'll be able to pick up on their traits pretty quickly. I never felt lost or confused about who characters are supposed to be, but I'm sure I missed out on tons of deep-cut references from the comics. Overall, I'd say this movie is a great stepping-on point for the character. It doesn't do anything subversive, it's not going to reinvent the wheel, but it does show what Superman represents. At his core, a desire to do good. While you might just have to nod along at a couple of the other hero antics, the world is creative and colorful enough that there should be a little something here for everyone. I already know this movie is gonna people off simply by virtue of not being comic book accurate, and there is merit to that. It's definitely an alternate interpretation of the character, and not a panel-to-screen adaptation of the Blue Boy Scout. But isn't that what makes comics great? Unlike manga, who are driven solely by a single person, comics can change hands over time, and interpretations of the characters can change with them. So, maybe getting to see a fresh take on the character every once in a while isn't so bad. I did like this movie, and it might even inspire me to pick up a few comic books related to the character. Who knows? If you all have any recommendations for Superman comic books I should read, let me know in the comment section below. I hope in the next Superman movie, now that Superman's got a handle on his emotions, we can see some real planet-busting action. Other than that, I've been Rambles-on. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Later, everyone.